You're listening to the WBT Podcast with Michael Lodge. Listen to all of our podcasts at www.wbtpod.com. Stay informed. Let's get started.
This is brought to you by Lodge & Co., a business and tax advisory firm where your success is our goal. Call us today toll-free at 888-681-1518 or visit us at www.lodge-co.com and learn more about what we can do for you. Lodge & Co., your source for sound business and tax services.
And welcome to the WBT. This is Michael Lodge. I'm glad that you joined me. So, a very good tax lesson we're learning from the Paul Manafort tax case against him. A lot of people think that when they sit down with their accountant, that they can write to them, they can tell them anything, and it's going to be protected under client privilege. That is really wrong. Attorneys have a client privilege. They have it so that they can sit down, they can talk to their attorneys, and they don't have to be afraid of what they're telling them, so that attorney can protect them. And so they sit down with their attorneys and they tell them all the secrets that they have on them to protect them, to help the attorney protect them from their case so that they can develop a legal strategy. The problem is that when you sit down with your accountant, you don't have a client privilege. What you tell your accountant can be used against you. In fact, the accountant can be compelled by the IRS or the Department of Justice to gather all the information that you have about your tax client. And let me tell you, the IRS and the Justice Department want you to think carefully, very carefully, before you sign on that tax return under penalties and perjury. Penalties and perjuries can get you into a lot of trouble and can land you in federal prison if it comes down to a criminal act. And that is very important for you to understand, is that as Manafort's accountant was up there, she had no ability to call out on the client privilege. Just can't do it. And that is the problem that we accountants have. And you know the IRS becomes very, very forceful in gathering documents when it comes to a criminal case. Taxes are complex, and the line between creative tax planning and tax evasion can be less clear than you might think. What is good planning or what is over the line? What is fraud and how long do you have to worry? So you must sign your tax returns under penalty of perjury. The numbers you report on that tax return must be true. They're not an open offer. And during the last presidents that we have had in office, case recommendations brought by the IRS to the Department of Justice have grown in number. They have soared. And with non-cash items you must report on your taxes, foreign bank accounts, and many other items, you are bound to be confused as a taxpayer. Now, thanks to attorney-client privilege, if you tell an attorney secrets, say you're hiding money offshore, the IRS cannot make your attorney talk. That is client privilege. The IRS generally can't even make your attorney produce documents for their case against you. The attorney-client privilege is so strong precisely so that clients in both civil and criminal issues will be forthcoming with their attorneys. Accountants, however, don't have this privilege. If you make statements or provide documents to your accountant, he can be compelled, he can be forced to divulge them, no matter how incriminating they may be. So understand that, but now we have to talk about one other thing for completeness. Is it is worth noting that there is a statutory tax preparation privilege. It was added into the tax code IRC section 7525 in 1998. But it is very, very narrow and practically does nothing. It is completely inapplicable to criminal tax cases. That makes it of very little value. In contrast, attorney-client privilege is worth a great deal and provides enormous protections under the law. But for accountants, we don't have that client privilege when you're talking with us. The only time that you will have that attorney-client privilege is if you hire a tax attorney or a criminal attorney, and that attorney then hires accountants underneath him to help him with the case. And whatever you tell that accountant is privileged because it's under the attorney-client privilege. However, the accountant who prepared those tax returns doesn't have that right. He doesn't have a privilege of any kind except to comply with the Internal Revenue Service or the Department of Justice. So you have to make sure that you are protected. You have to make sure, and being protected means that you are honest in all aspects of that tax return. If you have put $1,000 down on your tax return stating that you have this amount of money in a foreign bank account, but in actuality you have $30,000 in that bank account, you have just broken the law because you have to report anything that's above $10,000 to the Internal Revenue Service and to the Treasury Department. That becomes a criminal activity. So, attorney-client privilege is rarely tested. However, you don't want to end up having to fight about disclosure before a judge, especially when the communications may be very revealing between you and your accountant. So make sure that you're telling the truth at all times. Make sure you're putting the right numbers down at all times. I think this Manafort case has really taught us a good lesson about accountant-client privilege and that there's barely none. I know this is not good news, is it? Unless the accounting industry doesn't start talking to the Congress people and asking for client privilege, we just don't have it. So think about this very carefully as you're preparing your tax returns and you're working with your tax practitioner, that you're being honest on your tax returns and that you have the documentation to provide your tax practitioner in case an audit comes along. Don't look up in the air of grabbing numbers. I have had this happen so many times where you say, okay, how much have you spent on this item? And the client will look up into the air because that's where they keep their filing cabinets for their tax returns, is up in the air. You have to be very careful because the Department of Justice and the Internal Revenue Service are working hand in hand to close down this criminal activity that's going on out there. Remember, you have attorney-client privilege, but you don't have accountant-client privilege. So think about that. Every single time that you're preparing your tax returns, whatever you tell your client, or whatever you tell your accountant, Make sure it's truthful. Under penalties and perjury, every single time you sign your tax return, it's under penalties and perjury. And that's jail time if they find out that you've committed a criminal act. So that's it for today. If you have any questions, send me an email at mlodge@lodge-co.com, and I'll try and answer them as much as possible. Listen to all of my podcasts on www.wbtpod.com. I do a podcast every morning. Saturdays is music, Sunday is a church service, but Monday through Friday is pure taxation and business. So join me every single day on the WBT here. I really enjoy talking with you. And if you want a particular subject covered, send it over to me and I'll cover that subject for you. Have a great day. This is Mike Lodge for the WBT.
This is brought to you by Lodge & Co., a business and tax advisory firm where your success is our goal. Call us today toll-free at 888-681-1518 or visit us at www.lodge-co.com and learn more about what we can do for you. Lodge & Co., your source for sound business and tax services.
Thank you for listening to the WBT with Michael Lodge. Join us again tomorrow as we explore more about business and taxes. Follow us on iHeartRadio and go to our podcast website at www.wbtpod.com and listen to all of our podcasts and read our blogs.